Hi, I'm Hal Roberts. This is Bridge City News. Here's some of the top stories we've been following. The U.S. State Department is warning Russia to not use chemical weapons in its war with Ukraine. Prime Minister Justin Trudeau announced more sanctions against Russia and discussed the potential of flying Ukrainian refugees out of their war-torn country. And the Tim Hortons Briar continued at the NMAC Centre in Lethbridge. Today we hear about how some of the prairie foursomes made out.
Your nation, your province, your southern Alberta. From the heart of Lethbridge, it's Bridge City News with Hal Roberts.
Thanks so much for joining us. U.S. President Joe Biden says the United States and its allies will continue to dramatically downgrade its trade status with Russia as punishment for its invasion of Ukraine. Biden also says the United States will ban imports of Russian seafood, diamonds, and alcohol.
And we're going to continue to squeeze Putin. The G7 will seek to deny Russia the ability to borrow from leading multinational institutions, such as the International Monetary Fund and the World Bank. Putin is an aggressor. He is the aggressor, and Putin must pay the price. He cannot pursue a war that threatens the very foundations, which he's doing, the very foundations of international peace and stability, and then ask for financial help from the international community.
The U.S. State Department is also warning Russia against using any chemical weapons in its invasion of Ukraine.
This is a government that has used banned chemical weapons on its own people in the past. They've done so on Russian territory. They've done so on British soil. So we know what this government will resort to, can resort to, has resorted to in the past. We've seen very credible reports of deliberate attacks on civilians, which would, under the Geneva Conventions, constitute a war crime. We've seen strikes hitting schools, other hospitals, residential buildings, civilian buses, cars, ambulances have been shelled over the course of this brutal conflict. We've seen reports of civilian death toll in Ukraine, numbering from the hundreds to the thousands.
Prime Minister Justin Trudeau announced that Canada is sanctioning Russian oligarch Roman Abramovich, the owner of the Chelsea Football Club and a major shareholder in a company that operates a steel mill in Regina. Speaking in Warsaw, Poland, Trudeau says Canada will move forward with even more sanctions and has not ruled out flying Ukrainian refugees to safety.
On top of that, we will be placing restrictions on 32 military entities in Russia that will be prevented from receiving any form of Canadian equipment or supplies.
Following on your trip here, Poland, what you've seen, meeting the refugees, hearing from President Duda, just knowing the sheer numbers, can you possibly rule out a Canadian airlift anytime in the near future to bring those refugees that do want some relief and want to have some time in Canada?
No, I'm not ruling that out at all. We are looking at all options. We know how important it is to be there to support people fleeing. The connection between Ukraine and Canada is deep, goes back decades, over a century.
Defense Minister Anita Anand spoke at a three-day conference on security and defense in our nation's capital. Minister Anand says Canada's training mission in support of Ukraine has seen more than 33,000 Ukrainian soldiers being taught best self-defense techniques. She says our country is proud in its role in helping to prepare Ukraine's armed forces.
And through this mission, Canadian soldiers have conducted over 600 courses on tactical level combat, military policing, engineering skills, military medicine, and much more. This partnership has also been valuable for Canadian Armed Forces members themselves, who developed techniques in camouflage, concealment, and dispersion in this realm. When I was in Ukraine just over a month ago, I saw evidence of just how well Canadians and Ukrainians work together through Operation Unifier, and we are honored to support them in their courageous fight today.
This year marked the 90th anniversary of the Ottawa Conference on Security and Defense. A number of Conservative supporters in Canada believe the CPC leadership in September is Pierre Poilievre's to lose. Former Quebec Premier Jean Charest says, not so fast. He says he wants the opportunity to leave the federal Conservatives and unite the party. Charest visited Calgary recently to kick off his campaign and acknowledged that it's going to be a pretty tough fight.
We will have a very short period of time, about 2 years, to prepare for a general election campaign. And I guarantee you, if there's one thing I know and I have learned in politics, I know how to win. And I don't shy away from a fight. This fight is worth it. This is about Canada. And I'm going to be in this to win this fight, and I'll win it for the right reasons. First of all, for the Conservative Party, but I want to win for Canada itself.
I've always done very well in Alberta when I was in politics. People, one thing that Albertans feel strongly about is that it's not where you're from, and it's not your name, and it's not your diploma, or it's not that determines what your future is. I've always loved that about Alberta and Albertans. So in this province, I have a lot of people I've worked with over the years who are friends and colleagues who will be there, and it'll be a fight. It'll be a real fight, but what else is new?
The province of Alberta says February marked the 4th straight month of job gains in our province. According to Jobs, Economy and Innovation Minister Doug Schweitzer, Alberta added 8,200 jobs, dropping our unemployment rate to 6.8%. That's the lowest level since September of 2019. In a release, Schweitzer says recent projections by RBC show Alberta leading the country in GDP growth this year at 5.8%. The UCP announced that it will be implementing a new elementary school curriculum beginning this fall. Education Minister Adriana LaGrange says there will be a new math and language arts curriculum for kindergarten through grade 3, also a new K through grade 6 physical education and wellness program in September. A new curriculum for grades 4 through 6 in math and language arts will be online in September of 2023. LaGrange says the final curriculum will be available in April so teachers can prepare for the fall.
The final curriculum for the 3 subjects being implemented this fall will be available on new.learnalberta.ca in April. However, many of our education system partners have already started preparing for curriculum implementation. By making it important that we provide direction on implementation right now before the release of the final K-6 curriculum for these subjects.
Alberta Energy Minister Sonia Savage provided an update on her participation at a recent energy conference in Houston, Texas. Savage says our province's role in improving global energy security is vital in light of the war between Russia and Ukraine.
Alberta producers can be part of the solution. We can be part of the solution for both global energy security and especially for North American energy security. We sit on top of the 3rd largest reserves of oil on the planet. We're the 4th largest producer in the world, and we are already the largest energy supplier in the United States market.
Alberta NDP energy critic Kathleen Ganley says the province needs to do more to help Alberta families, especially when it comes to paying their utility bills. Ganley says Albertans are opening bills that are hundreds of dollars more than what they were just a few months ago.
The UCP promised to bring in a natural gas rebate program, but it turned out to be a complete fake. Not one single Albertan will see a dime in rebates from this program this winter, and it's highly unlikely that anyone will get help from this program ever. How did the UCP think this would work? The truth is they didn't. They committed a total of $0 in the budget to paying for the natural gas rebates.
A number of Albertans have decided to go with green energy, including adding solar panels to their homes. Michelle Sterling with Friends of Science says solar panels, though effective, can also become a financial burden for the Alberta taxpayer.
These are subsidized by other taxpayers, and those are usually the poorer people. So the person who installs the system, they might see some individual benefit, but it's an illusion to think that this saves you money when it ultimately drains the tax pool for everyone and further burdens all taxpayers.
Make sure you catch the full interview with Michelle Sterling from Friends of Science coming up after Business News. The high prices of gas are not only burning a hole in our pockets, but it's also having a negative impact on the trucking industry. Al Nelson of CJD Trucking says over 30% of their operating costs are related to fuel, and when it increases, it doesn't make the job any easier. He says filling those big rigs is very expensive.
When it increases by 40% over the period of a couple of months, that's very, very challenging. We have to pass that cost on to our customers, but that's not always possible. So, we end up on the short end of the deal sometimes. For us, I mean, if we were getting near to empty, put in 900 liters, 900 times a dollar 60. You're talking about a little over $1,400 to fill a truck up.
Nelson adds the UCP scrapping the provincial sales tax on fuel on April 1st will help the trucking industry substantially. Lethbridge police say 2 young males from Brockett have been charged in connection with an assault involving bear spray at Park Place Mall. The incident occurred December 26th at the mall during an altercation involving several people. For the safety of the shoppers, the mall was evacuated and then closed. During the closure, various businesses were robbed to the tune of $729,000. Upon further investigation, the 2 young males, aged 14 and 15, were identified and arrested on March the 10th. The young men have been charged with 14 offenses, including assault with a weapon and mischief over $5,000. They'll appear in court on April the 27th. Police in Fort Macleod responded to a complaint of a man passed out in the driver's seat of a running vehicle. When they arrived, they found drugs and cash and arrested the driver. Police say they seized 738 grams of suspected fentanyl and over $30,000 in cash. 25-year-old Douglas Yellowhorn of Brockett faces a number of charges, including drug trafficking and driving without a license. Yellowhorn was released on bail and will appear in Fort Macleod Provincial Court on March the 16th. Curling action continued at the NMAC Centre in Lethbridge today with the Battle of the Prairies. Team Wildcard 3 beat Team Manitoba 9-3. Meanwhile, Team Saskatchewan and Team Wildcard 2 played a fairly tight game, but in the end, it was Team Saskatchewan coming out on top 9-5. Team Wildcard 2 skip Mac Dunstone says the loss was difficult to swallow.
Yeah, sucks, obviously. Again, played really well. Just the little things that we need to go our way this week didn't happen for us, and that's curling. Really proud of the guys, how they battled. Yeah, I mean, it's just curling. It's the way it goes.
It's, obviously it'd be nice if we could both be in the playoffs, both being from Saskatchewan, but, it's great for the province that they have a playoff team no matter what in that game. So hopefully we can keep it rolling for Saskatchewan. Guys keep doing what they're doing. Front end's playing really good. We're making the right shots at the right time. We could easily be undefeated right now. That's how well we're playing. So just keep rolling into the playoffs.
As for the standings, Team Alberta is tied with Team Canada to lead the way at 7-1 in Pool A. And in Pool B, the Brad Gushu foursome and Wildcard 1 leads the way with a perfect 8-0 record. The Tim Hortons Brier wraps up Sunday at the NMAC Centre in Lethbridge. The Lethbridge Hurricanes have released assistant coach Jeff Hansen. The Canes are currently 3 games under 500 at 26-23 in the Central Division and are in danger of not making the playoffs. Canes general manager Peter Anhold says the team was not happy with the development of their defense and the accountability of their blue line, and it was time to make a change. The rest of the coaching staff remains intact, led by head coach Brent Kissio. The Canes visit the Regina Pats tonight before ending a 7-game road trip Saturday in Moose Jaw. Well, spring is just around the corner, and that means flooding season is upon us. A new survey put out by Public Safety Canada finds that most Canadians are not well prepared for flooding and weather-related risks. The survey also found that only about 11% of Canadians have taken the steps to properly prepare for a flood. A spokesperson for Public Safety Canada discusses some things people can do to prepare.
I think when people think about flooding, they tend to think about the big events, right? The big floods where it affects entire neighborhoods. But it's more than just that. You can have property damage from a fairly local event, like a significant rainfall or a flash thaw, right? So it's really about taking the time to do things around your property. Just do the little things that you can do to help mitigate that. Stuff like cleaning out your gutters in the fall. Making sure you have a sump pump that works, has a backup battery.
More tips on how to prevent a flood can be found on the Public Safety Canada website. The town of Raymond does not have a food bank. Now, to help provide for locals in need, the town has created the Free Pantry Society, which has been distributing hygiene and non-perishable food items to the town's less fortunate in the form of little free pantries. According to the latest census for the town in 2016, 12% of locals live in a low-income situation, as 17% of kids face the same issue. Now, the group is raising money to build a food shed.
Things like fresh fruit and vegetables, dairy, frozen foods. We're pretty limited in what we can do right now. Just the indoor location we have doesn't have power. The outdoor locations during the cold months can only be dry goods and nothing that would be damaged by freezing. And so the food shed will be a 4-season site where people can access it year round, and it'll be temperature controlled and have a fridge and a freezer.
The group is hoping to raise about $20,000 to be able to build the food shed and provide hygiene and food items to the residents of Raymond. The nonprofit organization Bridges of Hope has created the Dig Deep Burkina Water Project. An event will be held tonight to share the work the project has been doing in Burkina Faso. That includes building wells in remote villages in the African nation. As video journalist Micah Quinn explains now, organizers say this is a vital fundraiser to ensure water will be supplied to those who are in dire need.
You have 30,000 people who have access or will have access when Dig Deep is done.
The CEO of Bridges of Hope, Daniel Zapula, says after helping 30,000 people, the next step is to assist an additional 30,000.
But it's not all about putting a well. It's about putting the infrastructure that creates wealth. So right now, Dig Deep just sent $40,000 to create that system. So they have a water plant.
The group will host a wine and cheese night at the Galt Museum on Friday evening at 7 p.m.
You will see some pictures, including GPS coordinate of where the wells have been put. So you can follow it. You can look on Google Map and see exactly where the well have been dug. And so you know that your money goes exactly what we say is going to.
Proceeds from the night will go towards the project's goal of building 10 wells in Burkina Faso. Zapula says the group wants to be able to build more than just 10 wells going into the future.
We hope there's more for 10 wells. I want 1 million water wells. I want to plaster the whole world, the whole developing world, the world that have no water. People, everybody who has no water, everywhere, anywhere on earth, we want to bring you water.
Tickets are sold out, and Zapula says this is the 3rd annual event for the project. For Bridge City News, I'm Micah Quinn.
Such a wonderful initiative indeed. Well, the mercury has been climbing here in Lethbridge, and a pretty nice weekend is shaping up. Full weather details are on deck. It wasn't a bad TGIF today, fairly mild as we hovered around the freezing mark. Tonight, it should be partly cloudy with a low near +1. A nice weekend is shaping up. Saturday will feature a mixture of sun and cloud with a high near 8. Sunday, when we spring forward with our clocks 1 hour, expect lots of sunshine again and a high of 8 degrees. Monday, even warmer with the mercury climbing to 11. Tuesday, mainly sunny with a high of 13. Wednesday, a few clouds will develop with a high of 10. And Thursday, mainly cloudy with a high near 13 degrees. Checking the almanac, the average high for this time of year is 5 degrees with an average low of -7. The highest temperature on this date was 21 degrees set back in 2005, and the record low was a very cold -36 in 1951. The sun rose at 6:54 and set at 6:29. Let's see how tomorrow's shaping up across the country now. Expect lots of rain and 10 degrees in both Victoria and Vancouver. Partly cloudy and 5 degrees in Edmonton. A mixture of sun and cloud and 7 for Calgary. A slight chance of flurries developing and a high of 0 in Regina. Snow mixed with rain and +1 for Saskatoon. Lots of snow and -6 is on tap for Winnipeg on Saturday. In the central part of the country, Toronto should receive light flurries and -2. Snow and -5 for Ottawa. Snow as well and 0 for Montreal. In Atlantic Canada, Fredericton should receive heavy rain and a high of 8 degrees. Heavy rain as well and 10 degrees for Halifax. Periods of rain and 11 in Charlottetown. And in St. John's, Newfoundland, expect rain mixed with snow and a high of +1 on Saturday. The European Union, the United States, and other group of 7 nations, including Canada, are moving to revoke the most favored nation trade status for Russia over its invasion of Ukraine. U.S. President Joe Biden says his country will also ban imports of Russian seafood, alcohol, and diamonds. Stripping the most favored nation status would allow the United States and its allies to impose higher tariffs on some Russian imports. Biden says it will be another crushing blow and will put even more pressure on Russian President Vladimir Putin. The Canadian unemployment rate plunged last month to the lowest level since before the start of the pandemic, adding 337,000 jobs. That more than offset the loss of 200,000 jobs in January and pushed the unemployment rate down from 6.5 to 5.5%. Most of the job gains last month came from people called back to work after provinces began lifting COVID-19 restrictions. Royce Mendez, who is the head of macro strategy for Desjardins, says the February jobs report suggests the labour market is at or close to full employment. Stats Canada says the country's household debt-to-income ratio jumped to a record high in the fourth quarter to 186.2%. That means there was $1.86 in credit market debt for every dollar of household disposable income. The ratio was up from a revised 180.4% in the third quarter of last year and beat the previous record high of 184.7% in 2018. The increase in the fourth quarter came as household credit market debt rose 1.9% and household disposable income fell 1.3%. You know, when it comes to real estate, it appears as though there may be a shortage of homes available in Lethbridge. Local real estate agent Jeff Reimer with Royal LePage says it truly is a seller's market right now in the Windy City, and he says prices have also gone up over the past couple of years.
That's risen from 2020, it was close to about 300,000 for Lethbridge. And now that includes different genres of homes, not just single detached. And this year it ended up closer to 320-ish.
Catch the full interview with Lethbridge real estate agent Jeff Reimer discussing the Lethbridge and area real estate market. That's coming up after business news. Now, here's a look at today's markets. The TSX was down 119 points on the day to finish at 21,461. The Dow was down 229 points to 32,944. The S&P 500 was down 55 points to 4204, and the Nasdaq was down 286 on the day to finish at 12,843. West Texas Intermediate Oil was up $3.31 on the day to $109.33 US per barrel. Natural gas was up 9 cents to $4.73 US. Gold was down $8.52 to $19.8846 US an ounce, and silver was down 4 cents to $25.87 US an ounce. Feed wheat is at $13.61 per bushel, barley's at $9.88, canola's at $25.62, and corn is at $12.27 per bushel. Live cattle were up $1.40 to $137.30, feeder cattle were up $1.63 to $153.28, and lean hogs were up $2.63 to $102.73. The Canadian dollar was up slightly over the past 24 hours to $78.46 US. Recapping one of our top stories, Russia appears to be widening its offensive in Ukraine as it faces new sanctions from the United States and Canada. Russian forces struck airfields in western Ukraine and an industrial city in the east as its invasion reached its 16th day. U.S. President Joe Biden says the United States will dramatically downgrade its trade status with Russia and ban imports of seafood, alcohol, and diamonds. Many Albertans believe that green energy is the best route to go, including adding solar panels to their homes to cut down on electricity bills. Michelle Sterling from Friends of Science says solar panels are effective, but also create an extra burden for Alberta taxpayers. She'll have details shortly. But first, here's a look what's happening in and around your community.
Here's today's Bridge City News community calendar. Southern Alberta's largest home and garden show returns. The 2022 Home and Garden Show is taking place from March 30th to April 2nd at Exhibition Park in Lethbridge. With over 270 exhibitors, you'll discover a wide range of home and garden products, from flooring and cabinets to hot tubs and fireplaces, and much, much more. Admission is $8.50, $7.50 for seniors, and children 12 and under can enter for free. Parking fee is $5. For tickets and for more information, visit hglethbridge.ca. The Lethbridge Symphony Orchestra is celebrating their 60th anniversary with a performance of a special selection of memorable movie music from the past 60 years. Here's some of the most popular theme music from The Godfather, Star Wars, Lord of the Rings, and so much more. This special presentation is taking place Monday, March 21st at the Southminster United Church, with doors opening at 7 p.m. To purchase tickets and for more information, visit lethbridgesymphony.org. And that's your Bridge City News community calendar.
There's so much happening in our world right now, such as the war involving Ukraine and Russia. However, you will hear in this next interview, there's been another type of war taking place. that may go a little unnoticed. There's something that affects Canadians almost each and every day in a variety of ways. Here in Canada, we've heard a lot about green energy and the tactic of blocking new pipelines. Joining me now to talk about some of these issues between the Canadian petrochemical industries and the green movement is Michelle Sterling of Friends of Science. Michelle, thanks for joining us today from Calgary.
My pleasure.
Now, last time you and I chatted, we talked a bit about the money behind the efforts to keep Canadian oil in the ground and out of world markets. Has much changed in that regard?
No, people don't realize that billions of dollars of foreign funding has poured into Canada through these activist groups to block energy development. And we have a summary of the Deloitte report from the Allen Inquiry on our website. Oil, gas, and coal are global commodities. It's a very competitive market. So if the US, Russia, China, Iraq, Iran, or any competing commercial interest can keep our oil and gas from other parts of the market, then they get a better price and they get a better market share. So likewise, the label dirty oil was the perfect way to demarket the oil sands and push clean, so-called clean energy, making the public think that wind and solar could replace oil and gas and coal when nothing could be further from the truth, because wind and solar are entirely made from vast quantities of oil, natural gas, and coal, and they must have 100% conventional backup on the grid. So they're not energy dense. And I invite people to have a look at Robert Lyman's report, his summary of the Natural Resources Canada report, Inconvenient Facts for Climate Activists, because the real numbers show that we get huge financial revenues from conventional energy and its power and might, and we get almost nothing in return from the highly subsidized wind and solar and so-called clean tech.
There seems to be a real thirst or hunger right now for oil around the world, especially in the United States. And now the Americans, the Biden administration says we're going to be cutting back on a lot of the Russian conflict oil, but instead they're going after Saudi Arabian, Venezuelan, Iranian oil. Why not Canadian oil? We're their neighbors, and it's not conflict oil here. We're able to help out our American neighbors. Why not?
We have a report called Protest versus Green Trade War, and it takes a look at the tar sands campaign using images and messages in their own words. And it shows that there's really a battle going on between the Democrats in California and the Republicans in Texas. And so that's part of the battle. And also what's happening in the world is there's a lack of development of new resources. And Professor Samuel Farfari of Belgium is a chemical engineer and former official with the EU. And he predicted in 2017 that there would be an oil price shock by 2020 because there wasn't enough development of new resources. And people have pulled back their investments. They divested. People like Mark Carney have threatened companies with bankruptcy if they don't toe the line on climate change. And climate activists have driven off insurance companies and bank investors. So it's this lack of resources, along with the bounce back demand after COVID, that's affected global prices, driving them higher. And natural gas, of course, is also a market commodity, and it's always been subject to wild price swings. So we're impacted in Alberta, even though we have lots of natural gas here.
Let's talk a bit about fuel and diesel right now. Vancouver, I've talked to friends out there, it's like $2.09 a litre. A lot of my family in Southern Ontario, it's $1.85. Here in southwestern Alberta, it's $1.58. I think it just went up to $1.73. What's driving a lot of the high price of fuel right now?
Well, again, part of it is the global demand for fuel and the shortage, because there's a shortage of new resources and shortage of product in the stream. You know, if we had been able to complete TMX and Trans Mountain to BC, it serves consumers, ironically. It serves all the consumers of that Pacific Northwest area. But, it hasn't been completed. And so prices are very high there because of the lack of supply. And of course, on top of that, the carbon tax and the carbon tax, for the delivery of fuel, like millions of gallons of fuel are being delivered every day by a truck. And that truck has to be filled up with fuel that costs more money. So that money is, that expense is passed on to you.
Now we're seeing that energy is power. And there are costs related to the energy and power we choose. Do you think there's a bit of a deception of how green and cost-effective green energy is today?
Yes, the billions of dollars of foreign funding that's been promoting green energy has skewed the public perception completely. I think people should look at Václav Smil's presentation to engineering students at McGill called Energy Revolution. It's more like a crawl. And he's written about 40 books on energy. And, we see ridiculously, Germany is closing its nuclear power plants, but it's reliant on Russian natural gas and oil. It's completely compromised in the Russian-Ukraine conflict.
Now, last time we chatted, we talked a little bit about Alberta coal. Can you give us an understanding of how powerful petrochemicals are?
We have a report that's called Why Renewable Energy Cannot Replace Fossil Fuels by 2050, written by Robert Lyman. And the cover image is one from an article in the IEEE, which compares the energy density of a cubic mile of oil to alternative sources of energy. And we use in the world 3 cubic miles of energy equivalent, oil equivalent energy in the world every year, and one of them is a cubic mile of oil. So you see that there are dozens and thousands of other forms of energies would be required. And in 1 year, the amount of energy contained in a cubic mile of oil for each of 50 years, we'd need to have produced all those numbers of dams, nuclear power plants, coal plants, windmills, or solar panels. And you can see that on the cover of the report. I was just going to say there's a good article by Michael J. Kelly about the energy return on energy invested in various energy forms. And one of those is that wind and solar do not return enough energy to even support basic society. It wouldn't enable society to continue.
So the return on investment may not be there. Michelle, let's talk a bit about how petrochemicals can actually help lower the cost of living. Can you explain that, how that works?
Yes, in our report, Keep Canada in the Black, we address this. We not only get the energy dense, reliable, affordable power and fuel from petrochemicals, but we also get a vast product stream of useful goods that save time, they save money, food, they save lives in a medical context. And the revenues we get from the sale of exported oil, gas, and coal finance public services and operations, and that reduces the tax burden on you. So our daily lives are also said to have the equivalent of 97 servants just because of the power of fossil fuels.
A lot of times when my wife and I make a decision, we take a piece of paper, we write down pros and cons, left and right, before we make a big decision, whether to move or involving our kids and so forth. Well, a lot of people have been doing the same thing when it comes to coal. We look at the positives and the negatives. Positives, obviously, it gets more people working, it helps the communities, which is wonderful. But the negatives, people are concerned about the Old Man River being polluted with selenium. It's destroying the landscape of the Alberta Rockies. Where do you stand on this here when it comes to coal?
Coal is the most affordable, most reliable, and most abundant source of fossil fuels in the world. And Alberta has extremely high environmental standards. So I think that the loss of coal for Alberta was a tremendous blow, not to mention that it cost billions of dollars for coal phase out, like $22 billion at least. Plus, now we're importing more coal-fired power, but from where? From Saskatchewan and Manitoba, or Montana, and of course some BC Hydro as well. So we have to pay out of pocket for that, where before, coal is a resource that Alberta owns. So now we have less choice about what to power our grid with, as natural gas prices spike. Before we could rely more on coal, and now we can't. We just have to pay that extra tab. So that's the sad irony of the NDP coal phase-out campaign that advocates like Dr. Vipon and Pembina Institute said, we'd save $3 billion on healthcare costs. No, we've just paid billions of dollars for nothing.
Do you think that there's a potential that the Alberta coal plants could be reopened?
I really don't know, and I can't speak for any of the companies. I've never been in touch with them. On the companies and investors would likely be very gun shy, because it was the federal government that granted Alberta coal plants the right to operate until about 2060, and only the old plants would be offline by 2030. So the province overturned a federal legislation And that makes investors very gun shy, blow to confidence in any long-term project.
You know, obviously with inflation right now, people are trying to find ways to make life more affordable. You know, and sometimes people are thinking about putting solar panels on their homes. At current utility prices, and as they continue to rise, do these systems really pay for themselves?
Again, these are subsidized by other taxpayers, and those are usually the poorer people. So the person who installs the system, they might see some individual benefit, but it's an illusion to think that this saves you money when it ultimately drains the tax pool for everyone and further burdens all taxpayers. You know, you can see our article on the solar farm for the village of Carmangay. The Carmangay solar project's electricity is 7 times more expensive than the gas-fired electricity that it displaces. And regarding the fact that it has subsidies from federal and provincial governments, a portion of the costs, about $250,000, is not covered. So Carmangay has a population of about 261 people. That comes to a subsidy from other taxpayers of $920 per person. And a similar subsidy for all Albertans would cost $4 billion. So we've got 2 or 3 other reports people should look at: electricity from the sun, reality versus fantasy, the true cost of wind and solar for Alberta, and what you need to know about renewables that the Pembina Institute won't tell you. These will fill in the blanks. And it should be noted that Pembina Institute alone has been foreign funded for hundreds of thousands of dollars to push clean energy, so-called clean energy. Don't people have any questions about that? I mean, in 2018, they got $500,000 from the Energy Foundation of the US, and the purpose was to support education and outreach to build a clean energy future. Foreign influence, and lots of funding from the federal government and provincial governments as well.
Michelle, we've seen a lot of these wind farms, especially as you drive out to Waterton, Pincher Creek area, you see the wind turbines everywhere. What kind of a financial arrangement is there between maybe the government and some of these farmers with acres and acres of wind farms? Do the farmers get, like, I don't know, maybe $10,000 a year per wind turbine? I mean, how does the actual business model work? Do you know?
That's a good question, and I don't know the details of those contracts at all. But they usually do draw in the farm community because it's seen as another revenue stream for farmers. And unfortunately, as far as I understand, farmers will also get stuck with the cleanup because the advantage, one of the indirect subsidies that a lot of wind and solar producers get, is that they don't have the same rigid requirements that oil and gas companies have for decommissioning and restoration.
So if energy costs are actually rising for residents like they are for all of us right now, are they also rising for governments? What are your thoughts?
Yes, because governments also have to pay, you know, they have lots of buildings that they have to power, and they often try to use, they try to greenwash other investors, perhaps the bond buying market, by saying, oh, well, you know, the Alberta government is mostly run by biofuels, or the operations are, we've got solar panels on the roof of the legislature or whatever. But, you know, the problem is this does send up the costs all around for operating. And then, of course, the unions have a cost of living associated with their union contracts. So they want and get more money. And, the taxpayer ends up paying and paying and paying. And we have an article on this called Taxpayer Death by Debt and Taxes, which is all about governments going into the renewables end of things.
So as life gets to be more expensive and there's more of a push for green energy, but at the same time, we're all about oil and gas here in Alberta, and agriculture as well, obviously. What do you see as the best path forward for Albertans?
Well, first of all, the public have to be far more energy literate. They have to understand the implications of these. So I hope they'll look at our videos and our blog posts and reports, and they need to demand a full cost benefit accounting, because that's not happening. These things are being sold as a great way to save the planet, which is, of course, everybody's desire. But the actual costs are not being presented, and we have to stop the addition of renewables to the grid in Alberta because it will break our piggy bank. We're financing renewable energy credits for some of the richest companies in the world, and Donna Kennedy Glanz recently had an article on that. So I invite people to look at the costs of net zero. We have one of our professional engineers, a member, sent us their comments to the federal government. It's posted on our blog. So have a look at that, because you really need to understand this freight train of costs that's coming toward us fast.
Michelle Sterling from Friends of Science, thanks for joining us today from Calgary.
My pleasure. Thank you.
The Canadian economy continues to have its share of challenges with the ongoing uncertainties related to COVID, but it seems that overall, the residential real estate market has remained quite strong. Joining us now to talk a little real estate is Jeff Reimer. He's been a Lethbridge realtor for over 25 years with Royal LePage. Jeff, welcome back to Bridge City News.
Hey, nice to meet with you, Hal.
So Jeff, where are we at in southern Alberta when it comes to the real estate market right now? Is it more of a seller's or a buyer's market?
Yeah, it would lean towards sellers right now. The inventory is lower than historically, which supply and demand just, leans it towards sellers. But it's not crazy, but it certainly would lean toward the sellers right now.
So how many listings would you say we actually have in Lethbridge right now? Let's say between 250 and maybe 350,000, approximately. Where are we at?
I know the inventory is down, though. We're looking at citywide. The inventory is down probably to just under 3 months of supply. That I do know for a stat.
How about the average home price right now in Lethbridge? Where are we at?
Yeah, that's risen. From 2020, it was close to about 300,000 for Lethbridge. And now that includes different genres of homes, not just single detached. And this year it ended up closer to 320-ish.
Wow, that's incredible. So what do you think is selling the fastest right now? Would it be the townhomes, the condos perhaps, not only for the first-time home buyers, but maybe also those who are thinking of downsizing?
Yeah, condos started the pandemic, just about 2 years ago as being hit maybe the hardest of types of homes, because people were nervous about living in close quarters with others. And this year we've seen a good resurgence in the condominium and townhouse market. A little bit of getting back to school has also helped with the condominium and townhouse market. So the single family, though, had remained strong over the last 2 years, very strong.
Now, the older I get, the more I have a challenge when it comes to stairs. I know some of our viewers can relate to this as well. Would you say it's safe to say that maybe bungalows are becoming more popular as opposed to 2 stories, instead of having those 18 steps up and 17 steps down?
Yeah, yes and no. Certainly, yes, Lethbridge has an older population. It's kind of a retirement area for southern Alberta because it's, closer to the border. It's warmer here than in Calgary, Edmonton, for sure. So yeah, bungalows do stay strong in that respect. But with the land prices going up and developers tending to make smaller lots, the general trend is more 2 stories actually. So it's kind of a weird trend because of the cost of land, right? And you see it in bigger centers even more, but Lethbridge, you still have a lot more choice. But yeah, the 2 stories are still doing quite well.
Have you noticed over the years as well, because you've been a realtor for close to 30 years now, like you said, the lot prices have gone through the roof. I remember when I was a kid growing up in a bi-level or a bungalow, we had a huge lot. It would take us maybe an hour and a half to mow the lawn. But now with some of these 2 stories that they're building, they're like on postage stamp lots. You can almost reach out of your bedroom window and touch your neighbor's house.
Yeah, it's certainly changed, right? And busier lifestyles, it's weird, but I believe lifestyles are more busier now than they used to be. Less gardening, more people doing the grocery store than doing gardens. I mean, there's a factor of that doing in the lot sizes, but you can still go to the communities just outside of Lethbridge and get bigger lot sizes, like for Coaldale or Colehurst or Nobleford. Yeah, you can still get good lot sizes though in southern Alberta, which is nice.
Maybe with some of the grocery prices going through the roof right now, maybe people will consider getting the bigger lots and going back to gardening. Try and save some money that way.
Absolutely. My wife made me clean up the yard. She wants to put some raised flower beds in this year. And I think that's a bit of a trend. You see people doing more of that so they can control what they're eating. They're not concerned about, additives. They can grow their own stuff, have it fresh. And yeah, it's definitely, we're seeing a bit more of that for sure. And it's good, healthy lifestyles. So
Yeah, you're right. I mean, a vegetable garden is good, and the flowers add a little bit of color, helps pick up our spirits, bring up our spirits a little bit. Now, there's certain areas of Lethbridge, Jeff, that tend to be more popular for buyers than others.
Hmm. Yeah, I mean, depends where you're at. All areas of Lethbridge have their pros. Uh, the west side's developing more just because there's more land available there, and the infrastructure's growing. The north side really did well with the implementation of that new park there up by Legacy. That's really helped them. And the south side is always, the commercial hub and close to the airport. And, for folks going south, that's always a prime area. There's just not as many areas to expand in the south. So, the demand is still strong in all three areas of Lethbridge.
I've been chatting with the mayor and some other city officials as well about the potential of maybe Walmart going into the west side. I talked to a lot of people who live on the west side, and they're begging for either Walmart or even a Canadian Tire. What have you been hearing?
Well, I don't have any privy information, but I do know that talk of a third bridge, if that could be years and years away. But specifically, I don't have news on that, but it's still a short drive. I live on the west side and I zip across that bridge in a few minutes and I can get downtown in 5 minutes from my house almost. So, Lethbridge is still a really accessible community from all areas. It doesn't take you long. You can get from one end to the other in about half an hour, no problem. And that's a real plus when you're considering communities to move to.
So, Jeff, are people still hesitant about viewing homes during the pandemic, or are they pretty used to that now?
More used to it. I mean, it's still a concern, but the sales would indicate that we've done well of working through that. People are a little bit more at ease, certainly, than they were a year ago. But we still like to take precautions and wear masks and sanitize and be careful. But no, generally, it's been good, and we've worked through it, and the sales have reflected that that's been overcome.
How about open houses? Is that still a good way for you to potentially get leads or show people what the house looks like that's on the market?
It is an option. It's less of an option. People are more comfortable viewing initially on their computer and looking at virtual tours, but it still can be a good tool. I mean, nothing's different than going into a house and seeing and smelling and feeling the perspective that you don't quite get from a camera, and then standing out and looking around at the areas and how the rooms reflect and light reflects. And, you still need to go into a house to get the true feel of it.
Now, we've seen some record low interest rates. Do you think this trend will continue, or with inflation, are mortgage rates likely to start going up?
Yeah, I'm not an economist, but certainly the rates have been great. That's been part of the stimulation of our market. And Lethbridge is a conservative money town, I think, and so the lower interest rates has helped boost Lethbridge as well. And I think that there's pressure to slow down inflation for sure. So they're saying they're going to raise interest rates, and they were, they moved a few here this week, a little bit up, but I don't think they're going to do too much. When I talk to my banker friends, they're suspecting that they will rise somewhat, but they're still going to be reasonably low. I remember when I bought my first house, I locked in for 7 years. I was stoked I could get it at 7.625. So I locked it in for 7 years, I think it was. And now, I mean, the rates are still incredibly low, and that's going to keep the market, I think, moving fine.
You're right. I remember when I first bought our first home too, it was 80 to 90% of the payment that I would make would go towards the interest. But now it's almost like 50-50. That's what's amazing. Not only are you building equity, but at the same time, you're paying down your house. Now, Jeff, do you think a variable rate mortgage is still a good option in our current market?
Yeah, I think variable rates are still good. When I speak with some of my friends that study this stuff regularly for a living, if you take an example of what a variable rate would be over the last, let's say, 25 years, my friend Rick always says this. He says, and you look and then you take a 5-year rate and you work it backwards, you're still going to generally be ahead going with the variable. The challenge is it's just slightly more risk. But if you're not over leveraged and your debt load isn't too high, I think there's still a good argument for doing the variable. But if you want to lock in right now, it's not bad because they are probably going to inch up. So if you want to make sure your rate's secure and set for 5 years, it's not, but I definitely recommend talk to your mortgage broker, ask their opinion, then consult with your family. Still use the wisdom of friends and family that have gone through, more than just 10 years of life in the business world, and get their opinions on it. Ask family, ask friends, and talk with your mortgage broker before you make that decision, instead of just doing what you think is best.
Jeff, let's talk about how property values increase here in Lethbridge compared to some other markets. Like Toronto can go through the roof, Vancouver, even Calgary a number of years ago. We sold our house for $198. 4 years later, it went up to over $500,000. You really don't see that here in Lethbridge. So would you say it's more of a slow, steady incline, like maybe 2 or 2.5% each year? How do you see it?
Yeah. Well, it sure started like that when I started 29 years ago. But, some of these old timers would say, oh, yeah, just every year add on 2%. And you certainly can't do that anymore. In 2005, 6, and 7, it almost doubled house prices. Then we hit a peak there in Lethbridge around August of 2007, and then they went down a little bit, but we've regained that loss back. So I would say, right now it's the highest prices we've seen in my career in Lethbridge. And, it's a combination of things, though. Lethbridge always was a good value for a town. But these big centers like in BC and in Toronto, when they can cash in and sell a townhouse for 7, 8, 900,000, and then move to Lethbridge, buy a big, beautiful house for 400,000 or 500,000, and then put some extra money aside or completely eliminate any debt and have a little nest egg, it's enticing. So we're finding right now, especially, that we're seeing more people move from BC and from the East, and taking advantage of the reasonable cost of living here and the lower house prices for sure.
But does the Lethbridge wind blow them back to BC?
Yeah, well, it's always a try. Who doesn't want to go to the mountains? But we have mountains in Alberta too, and we're only an hour and a bit from the mountains here in Lethbridge. That's what I love about it. We get the nice fresh air blowing in from BC, but we also get the milder temperatures. I still think it's one of the best places to live in the country.
How well are some of the bedroom communities around our city doing, like maybe Raymond, Coaldale, and Nobleford?
Yeah, they're doing quite well. Very few houses available in Nobleford. Coaldale's a hot little market. It's hard to find too much property there right now. Supply and demand there is keeping that market very strong. And Raymond as well. Raymond had a good year. Maybe in the last couple months calmed a little bit, but very strong over the year, just like Lethbridge. Yeah, maybe even more so in some of those towns.
So Jeff, let's talk a bit about the stress tests and the tougher mortgage requirements. Can you explain how they work?
Yeah, basically they just wanted to keep the debt load down of Canadians. They were concerned about how much debt load they were having compared to what they should be able to handle in their opinion. And, trying to calm the house prices in the larger centers. It really was needed more so in Vancouver and Toronto, for example. We really didn't need that here in Lethbridge. When it implemented, we thought, well, in theory that could be good, but we just don't need that here in Lethbridge. We're pretty calm and stable here. So yeah, they implemented it there, but we really didn't need it here in Lethbridge, in my opinion, whatsoever.
So Jeff, what advice would you give to a young couple trying to save up for a down payment to buy their first home? What sorts of things do they have to put together financially before they're ready to make an offer?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that stress test factors into how they qualify. So they should get their down payment ready, so save up. You have to have a stable job. So before you make any life changes, maybe talk to your mortgage broker or your banker and say, I might be wanting to buy a house in the next year or two before you make a decision to change a job or maybe lease a vehicle, because it's going to affect your debt load. And that stress test we mentioned, basically it takes the current rates and it adds 2% or defaults to 5.25%. And basically it just qualifies you a little bit higher than what you're paying, so that if rates go up, you're not right away defaulting and losing your house. So it is a good thing in theory, but for a first-time home buyer, it's important to just go meet with your mortgage broker, get pre-approved, kind of understand that, what it is to understand your gross debt service ratio and your total debt service ratio, what the bank's going to want to see for your amount of income, that you're at a stable job for a period of time. They're going to check your credit. So make sure that you maybe do a little research with your banker ahead of time, so that if all of a sudden you say, oh, I didn't make that payment like 2 years ago, that you can get that rectified sooner, get that cleared off your credit. And then you can strategize with your broker as to how the best way to go forward will be.
Jeff, we only have a couple of moments left here, but I want to ask you about empty nesters. Are you seeing more who are downsizing here in southwestern Alberta?
Yeah, I guess that's always a factor when house prices go up. It's easier for them to sell and move into something smaller. I don't know if much more than before, but it's a good part about Lethbridge is we have good options. There's the new big building getting on Scenic, that's going to take out some of the supply up, and there's always been a need in Lethbridge for good retirement housing. But as far as seeing more or not, I don't know, a lot more farmers have trended to sell their larger farms or sell their smaller farms into larger farms, and that retirement rural community has moved into Lethbridge and kept the demand strong. And that's an ongoing thing for Lethbridge. We're a nice retirement center for anyone in Alberta.
And plus we have lots of students here as well with the college and the university. Jeff Reimer, a Lethbridge realtor with Royal LePage for close to 30 years. Thanks so much for your time today.
Thanks. Nice chatting with you, Hal. Have a good day.
You as well. On behalf of all of us here at Bridge City News, I'm Hal Roberts. God bless and thanks for watching.